Yeah. What I wanted to do firstly is just to talk a little about your emotional responses to what we talk about today, because that's really important. As you are all probably aware, how many of you have actually been to the Oneness University? Pretty much all of you. And how many of you did the 21-day? Right? And how many did the 7-day?
7 days.
Okay. Okay. Those of you who did the 21-day, you'll realise how intense it was emotionally. Is that the case for those of you who did the 21-day? For those of you who did the 7-day, it was a little different emotionally. So you may not have heard some of the things that I'll discuss a little bit later as we go through. But the reason why I wanted to ask those questions is because it's very important that you understand your own emotional responses to everything we discuss today. And it's very important that you take ownership of those emotional responses. So what I would like to do is just talk to you about some of the emotions you may feel, and then we can sort of discuss, if you like, how you go about actually owning these emotions within yourself. Now, you know at the Oneness University that there was very much a focus on emotion. And the reason why is if you can't focus on your causal emotion, in other words, you can't access the basic underlying emotions that drive your actions, then what will happen is you also will not ever be fully connected with yourself. And you'll also not ever be fully connected with God. So that's a very important thing to understand too. The second thing I'd like to just briefly mention as well, as I go through this discussion, is how we connect with God. And how many of you have a viewpoint of God still that God is an energy force, rather than an entity? So in other words, how many of you have a sort of a general concept of God, compared to how many of you feel that God is actually some kind of individual of some kind that you can connect with on a personal level? So those of you who feel that God's personal, can I just have a show there? So
you mean personal as we connect personally, individually with Him?
And that God is an entity.
Yes, okay.
That God is an entity in His own right, like that exists without your existence. Yeah? And how many of you feel that God is different to that? Yeah. Okay, so a few of you. Okay, so that gives me some idea of where we're at in terms of our feelings about God. Firstly, my feelings about God are that God is an entity, and that I can have a personal relationship with God. Right? So all of the comments that I'm going to make today are all going to surround that basic premise. And if you are uncomfortable with that, then of course you're probably not going to be able to accept much of what I say today. The second thing is to understand your own emotional condition. The key thing to understand, and this is one very basic thing to understand, is that every time you get into your intellect, and every time you feel any annoyance, frustration or anger, you are actually denying your own emotion at that point. You follow me? So during today, there will be some statements that I'm going to make that you're going to say, how can he know that? He doesn't know that. That's just his personal opinion. Well, yes, you may feel it is my personal opinion. I am giving you my time for free, which is very, very different than what has happened with you with the Oneness University, is it not? And I'm giving you my time for free. You do not have to accept anything I say to you at all. And if you don't want to accept it, that's fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. I am here at Grant's loving invitation to do this, and one thing that I want to say up front is that if I do feel anger projections from you, I will first be addressing that. The second thing I'll do is I'll ask you to leave, or I'll stop, one of the two. Now, do you understand why that's the case? The reason why is because if I'm giving of my love to you, and giving of my time and my energy and my effort to you, and you can't own your own emotions in that transaction, just like I need to own my own, then straight away there's resistance. And there's resistance in your heart for accepting. Now, as soon as there's resistance emotionally inside of me, there's also going to be resistance to anything I'm hearing. And all that I'm hearing will just pass through these emotional filters, these beliefs that I have already established within myself of how I believe the universe to be. And if that occurs, as those emotions pass through me, I'm going to filter out every single thing that's said to me, and I'm going to interpret as something completely different than what's actually being said in many cases. And that is a very damaging thing to do to yourself, but also in the projection of anger to somebody else, that then becomes a damaging thing to them as well. And so if I love myself, I can't allow that to continue, if that makes sense. You'll also notice that almost every time, those of you who spent particularly the 21-day Oneness course, you'll notice that every time you got into anger, if you ever did, you were always usually brought to it was brought to your attention, and that there was something deeper underneath that. And it's very important for you to understand that today as well. Now, that being said, I don't think I'm going to say too many things that make you angry. I'm just saying, just let yourself feel those emotions. Just let yourself feel them. Today, there are lots of spirits who have come with you today.
Fantastic.
All right. Now, many of those spirits are oneness blessing spirit givers. And they exist in different spheres of the spirit world, from the 4th to the 6th sphere. And many of them have a lot of trouble with the things that I've been saying to them. I've been talking to them privately on other occasions. In fact, at one stage I talked to nearly 2,000 of them at one point. And they have a lot of difficulty with the things that I've been saying to them, which also means then, because you're connected with them, that you're possibly going to have some difficulty with the things I'm going to say to you as well. Does that make sense? Because of that spirit influence. Now and I want to give some background about what's actually happening with the oneness movement in the spirit world, because that's something that probably very few of you have ever been talked about or even thought of, perhaps. And I want to talk about that because it's very much influencing what's occurring with the oneness movement here on Earth. And that being said, I feel the oneness movement has a lot of beautiful potential for major changes on the Earth. And it just is a matter of everyone in the oneness movement understanding what's actually going on and then utilising the divine laws of our Father in such a way that all the truth becomes known to the people you're giving the blessing to. So that's very important, that truth, the whole truth, not just partial truth or limited truth, is actually told to each person, and particularly to yourselves as the persons giving the blessing. Now, whether you accept this as the truth or not, that is totally up to you. And I can explain as many things as possible of what's going on, but you will need to personally experience them to know whether they are true or not in the end. It's like every truth that you will ever accept. You will only ever accept it once it becomes your personal experience.